This is my house.
This video is about the atheist channel Rationality Rules and a video he put out titled Cuckoo Christianity, the Rise of Faithless Faith. So what's the premise of this video?
There seems to be a growing trend of public figures and intellectuals embracing the label of Christian without actually affirming any Christian doctrines and beliefs.
And spoiler, he's going to take aim at Jordan Peterson, Douglas Murray, Ayaan Hirsi Ali and Konstantin Kisin and accuse them of being these so-called Cuckoo Christians that he describes thusly.
What do we call these Christians? Well, I say we call this phenomenon Cuckoo Christianity, and its adherents Cuckoo Christians. Fitting, no? Just as cuckoo birds lay their eggs in other birds' nests to let them do all the hard work of raising the chicks, these Cuckoo Christians hide under the Christian label and gain their cultural support, without believing in Christian doctrines.
So he's accusing these four people of pretending to be Christians for personal gain. This despite the fact that in the video that he himself uses as evidence for Constantine pretending to be a Christian, Constantine describes himself as agnostic, or more accurately, a lapsed atheist.
When asked about my religious views, I usually call myself an agnostic. But if I had to describe my views more accurately, it would be fair to say that I'm a lapsed atheist.
Oh, and he's also from a Jewish family. Now, I'm going to try to be fair to Rationality Rules, as fair as I possibly can be, and not all criticism is fair. I remember a recent comment under a video of mine, Doctor Who Why You Shouldn't Be a Fan, that said, "Nobody said anything about your sexuality, bro. Nobody's looking for an argument, we're just explaining why you're wrong. If you can't take criticism, don't criticise." Right. So, I read that and thought, okay, what was the criticism this person was talking about that explained why I was wrong in the video? So I went and checked. And what was the criticism this person was referring to? Well, that comment was under the initial post. Smells of incel in here. And wait, that was the criticism this person thought was valid. That was the explaining why the content of my video was wrong, was it? Because to me that's just an ad hominem attack. A logical fallacy. My arguments in that video lay completely untouched. And that was just a personal attack of, well, you just can't get girls. And there's not much to go on as to why they chose to write that, but considering the video it was under, the odds are probably in favour of them being a die-hard and not very rational Doctor Who fan, which at this point may be a tautology. But for reasons maybe only known to YouTube's algorithm, I got a video on my front page from the YouTuber Rationality Rules. Rationality Rules, as well as being a YouTuber, has a card game out. It's called Debunked, and in the game you have to debunk bad arguments by calling out logical fallacies. We should get along, surely. That sounds right up my alley. And no, that's not an innuendo.
Nice beaver.
Thank you. I just had it stuffed.
Let me help you with that.
That's an innuendo. I think I've seen a few videos from him before and didn't find them to be that bad. And from the thumbnail it appears he's going to take aim at Jordan Peterson, Constantine Kisin, Douglas Murray and Ayaan Hirsi Ali. So let's have a look at what he had to say about Jordan Peterson first, because that comes first in his video. Exhibit 1. Jordan Peterson.
Take, for example, the OG Jordan Peterson, the immensely popular psychologist and self-help guru who's an expert in, well, everything, from climate change to gender to politics, religion and genetics.
And is Jordan Peterson an expert in everything? Has he ever declared himself to be that? Does not being an expert preclude someone from talking about a subject? And if only experts are allowed to talk about a subject, who decides who's an expert? Is it me? Is it the government? Is it supposed to be Rationality Rules?
Sure, experts are not very happy with him speaking utter bull, but what do they know, huh? They're just part of the big bad establishment.
No examples of Peterson declaring himself to be an expert. No examples of the arguments from Peterson that he thinks are wrong. He presents a few-second clip from a lecture with no context. No evidence of those arguments from Peterson that RR didn't even present actually being wrong. Just that unnamed people he somehow deemed to be experts disagree with Peterson. And that's an argument from authority fallacy, combined with a bit of an ad hominem attack and poisoning the well. I wonder how many points I'd get for that in Rationality Rules' card game. And I think it's the worst form of the argument from authority fallacy as well. I call it the argument from someone else's authority. It's like you disagree with someone on a point of law, and they say you're wrong, and they know because they're a lawyer. That's the argument from authority fallacy, because being a lawyer does not make someone right by default. They may be wrong, even though you'd hope not. If being a lawyer makes someone right by default, then what happens when two lawyers disagree on a matter of law? They'd both be experts, and therefore simultaneously have to both be right. Does the universe implode at that point? It's an argument so fallacious it can't even sustain its own weight. But what RR did for me here is worse than that. This is an argument from someone else's authority. This is like you disagree with someone on a point of law and they say you're wrong, and they know because their mum's a lawyer. But rationality rules may even go lower than that. At least that person named their source, which is their mum. RR just did an argument from no one's authority. On the authority of an unnamed expert, and trust me, they really exist. So what is Jordan Peterson's faith? Well, RR presents a bit of video that I think is telling.
Well, do you believe that Jesus rose again from the dead? Literally.
I cannot answer that question.
Which is, you know, the central tenet of the Christian faith.
But no, that isn't, I would say, a central tenet of the Christian faith. And I hate that he said that. I hate that people keep on using the word tenet when they mean tenet. Like the film, a tenet is a principle of belief, especially one of the main principles of a religion or a philosophy. Whereas what he said, a tenant, is a person that rents or occupies land or a house. The fact that Jordan Peterson can't or won't answer that question kind of made me think he was hiding the ball. But when I tried to look, Jordan Peterson just seems to have very complex ideas on the issue of faith. He firstly objects to the question and finds it manipulative.
So people often ask me, do you believe in God? Which I don't like that question. I don't like that question. I don't like that question.
He says that he doesn't know precisely what God or faith are. I've watched multiple videos of him, and I'm still not convinced I properly understand his position. He says in one that he doesn't go to church.
The traditions bind the community together. Now I'm saying that, and I don't go to church. You know, and the reason I don't go to church is because, well, it drives me crazy, to speak frankly.
In another, that he can think of no good arguments for atheism.
I don't think there is a good argument for atheism.
He says in another video, in order to answer the question, does he believe in God, he would have to know how the person asking the question defined both belief and God, and good luck with that. And he says he's scared that God does exist, but tries to act in life as if he does. I don't know what Jordan Peterson's faith is, and I'm not sure he does either. He tends to be so vague on the subject, I have no idea. But the problem for me is that RR has at no point qualified any of his claims made about Peterson in his introduction. He claimed,
There seems to be a growing trend of public figures and intellectuals embracing the label of Christian without actually affirming any Christian doctrines and beliefs.
And his evidence of that in his own video is Peterson, it seems, desperately trying to avoid picking up the label of Christian. If anything, Peterson from the clips he shows seems to be the opposite of that. Peterson seems to affirm some Christian doctrines and beliefs while desperately trying to avoid the label of Christian, so RR's first exhibit seems to be a complete failure in proving his thesis. He then very briefly moves on to Ayaan Hirsi Ali. Ali seems to be taking a different approach to Peterson, like in this article where she declares herself to now be a Christian, in an article titled Why I'm Now a Christian, Atheism Can't Equip Us for Civilizational War. That's the main thrust of her article, that atheism has left the West disunited and weak to external threats, and RR never actually tackles the main thrust of her article. RR's critique seems to be that she's not a true believer, because she doesn't talk about her newfound faith in the article, and is instead coming mostly from a utilitarian perspective, to use Christianity as a unifying force for the West in the face of grave threats. And that isn't exactly true either. Now, Ayaan Hirsi Ali is pretty new to Christianity by the sounds of things, and still seems to be learning, but she does say, in this very article that he presents as evidence, Yet I would not be truthful if I attributed my embrace of Christianity solely to the realisation that atheism is too weak and divisive a doctrine to fortify us against our menacing foes. I have also turned to Christianity because I ultimately found life without any spiritual solace unendurable, indeed very nearly self-destructive. Atheism failed to answer a simple question: what is the meaning and purpose of life? And her thoughts are similar to ideas I've had in the past while watching Richard Dawkins, while he explained why people did not have to rely on religion in order to find a moral code, because he said he could arrive at a moral code of his own in the absence of religion. But what for me he seemed to fail to take into account is that everyone else is not Richard Dawkins. And some other people may need help and guidance in that regard. Some people may in fact need it really, really badly. I'm just saying, left to her own devices, what kind of moral code do you think Cardi B is going to arrive at? So RR is trying to link these four people, Jordan Peterson, Douglas Murray, Ayaan Hirsi Ali and Konstantin Kisin, as a phenomenon he refers to as Cuckoo Christians, people that embrace the label of Christian, and out of four of them in this video, that claim, from the evidence he himself presents, seems to be true of one of them, Ayaan Hirsi Ali. She's the only person out of the four that embraces the label of Christian. But does she, like these Cuckoo Christians,
hide under the Christian label and gain their cultural support without believing in Christian doctrines?
I don't know, and I don't think RR does either. There's nothing in her article for me to suggest that her belief is not genuine, and to do so would seem to require mind reading. So then RR gets onto Douglas Murray and Murray's quite sympathetic statements on Christianity.
These ideas, like the dignity of the individual, these come from the Judeo-Christian tradition.
And he has some clips of Douglas Murray talking, and from these I got that Murray is maybe a cultural Christian, as opposed to a believer, and sees the roots of the Enlightenment as coming from Christian values. And from interviews, he indeed seems to maintain that he's a cultural Christian or a Christian atheist. That's how he describes himself. A person that holds many of the core values of Christianity to be good, just without the belief in God. So that's another one of the four who is markedly not embracing the label of Christian. But where RR's video gets most flawed for me is his takedown of Konstantin Kisin and a video of his titled The Atheism Delusion. And it's a video that, for me, is deserving a response video all of its own. Constantine raises some very interesting ideas for me in that video, and it's in this that he says,
When asked about my religious views, I usually call myself an agnostic. But if I had to describe my views more accurately, it would be fair to say that I'm a lapsed atheist.
So Constantine is yet another person who's markedly not embracing the label of Christian. And how did RR respond to Constantine saying that?
There are a few ways that the label atheist and agnostic are applied, but in the context of going from atheism to agnosticism, this would imply once believing that there's probably no God, to now believing that there's a fair chance that there is one. So what we might expect to hear is reasons as to why Constantine now believes there's a decent chance there's a God.
And at no point did Constantine Kisin say that he went from being an atheist to being an agnostic. It's like RR did not even bother to listen to what he was saying.
When asked about my religious views, I usually call myself an agnostic. But if I had to describe my views more accurately, it would be fair to say that I'm a lapsed atheist.
But in the context of going from atheism to agnosticism, this would imply once believing that there's probably no God, to now believing that there's a fair chance that there is one. So what we might expect to hear is reasons as to why Constantine now believes there's a decent chance there's a God.
And no, that doesn't follow at all. An agnostic is someone who does not know, or believes that it's impossible to know if a God exists. Google has agnostic defined as a person who believes that nothing is known or can be known about the existence or nature of God. So RR fundamentally mischaracterises what agnosticism is. Where in that definition did you get the idea that agnosticism implies a fair chance of God's existence? Agnosticism is like saying that there's simply not enough data. Agnostics would view it, I think, as I can neither prove that God exists or that God does not exist. It does not go into probabilities, but it would seem that in RR's mind, being agnostic, which Constantine didn't say he was anyway, is now the same as being a Christian. That was his evidence that Constantine has embraced the Christian label. And that's the way he goes on for about the next 10 minutes of this video, responding to a video that he actively appears to be trying his best to not listen to. So Rationality Rules, here for me, covered 4 quite interesting thinkers, while not giving proper consideration or even really listening to any of them. But I suppose you don't really need to listen if you genuinely think you can read minds. It sadly would seem that in this video, rationality doesn't seem to rule.
Of course!
And the Bob Igers are like, no, what's going on with my stars? No, Captain Kennedy.
Never rub another man's rhubarb.